The Scene projects are brought to you by these fine sponsors: Cliff Avenue Upholstery and Restoration, Chevy Girl Advertising and Booking, Sunny Radio, and SiouxFallsPodcast.com.
Welcome into a very exciting episode of The Scene. I am your host, Bubba Starts, and with me today is my buddy, Hank Ambrose. Hank, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I bet for you it's a little awkward to be on the other side of the microphone. But before we get too far down, why don't you give us a little bit of who is Hank Ambrose and what do you do?
Well, yeah, I think you'd be correct in saying that I'm a radio personality myself. I'm out of Spencer, Iowa with KUYY Y100, and I have a morning show there. I also cover regional sports, but one of my biggest passions is covering live and local music. And every single Friday morning at 8:30 during my morning show, I bring in a brand new musician from out of the Midwest, from a variety of genres, mostly country and folk and Americana, just because that's kind of the majority of what we have here in Iowa. But that's the main thing of what I do.
And that's amazing. Obviously, that's where we overlap. I am a member, and we are, I'm assuming the station is as well, of the Midwest Country Music Organization. We're working with these people. I'm a newish member, but just love what you're doing over there, Hank. You've had several of my new friends on the show. We need more of it. It's something that lacks in today's the scope of radio. Now we have podcasts that allow us to get a lot more coverage, with a lower overhead, and I think that's why podcasts are becoming so much more popular. But we still need that radio presentation, right? We still need that presence out there on the airwaves, and I'm so happy that you're out there doing it. Where did the inspiration come for the live and local show? You seem like a pretty young fella. Has this just been a passion of yours?
Yeah, so I'm 22 years old, and there's been a few different aspects of inspiration. First of all, radio was not what I was thinking I was going to get into by the time I was out of high school or even graduated college. I was really looking more the video and TV route of things. But I'm so happy I fell into radio. And, I got my start in radio in Fort Dodge, Iowa, at a station that is also a part of the Midwest Country Music Organization at K97. And a former coworker and co-host of mine over there named Josh Mason, who is involved in the country music world as well as the rock and roll world, he brought something to a shift that me and him shared together called the Live Tune at Noon. Now, the Live Tune at Noon is a little different from the segment that I run called the Local Spotlight at Y100. The Live Tune at Noon brings on a live guest every single Friday at noon, strictly in the country music world. And, watching him set up and have that passion, I quickly realized I had that same passion. I always did, but I guess I didn't really know how to learn it. It's not something you really learn in school to set up mics. It's just kind of set up mics and produce and mix and interview. It's something you kind of have to be to learn under someone's wing, right? So Josh Mason at K97 is a big inspiration of mine. Another one, John Prine, who is a singer, songwriter, and one of my all-time favorite artists. He used to highlight musicians that were independent with Oh Boy Records, and that's something that drew a lot of inspiration to me. I think there are so many talented musicians in the world, and I think there are so many more that need to be highlighted on today's radio that just simply are not. And it really hurts me when I see some of these artists that I love and listen to every single day don't get the recognition they deserve. So that's just what I'm trying to do with my shift.
I think it's awesome. And exactly what you're talking about is exactly how we kind of fell, backwards into this podcasting and everything that we're doing. So we host a weekly event called the Songwriter Showcase, where we feature one songwriter at a local establishment. and record that for the podcast. They get to share 4 or 5 of their songs. We interview them in between. Becomes a very, the old VH1 storyteller. You're way too young to remember all that stuff. But we used to have these things in the mainstream, right? Like we were getting this from mainstream artists years and years ago. And then as the paradigm has just completely shifted and the music industry has totally changed, it's actually made it better because all the artists are independent now, or at least, a vast majority of artists that are out there are independent artists. They're not signed to any labels or doing, they're not playing that game. So they're not under anyone's control. But then you also have the advent in the last, really the last 5 years of podcasts just being the chosen media source as far as ears. Now, that doesn't mean that every podcast, right, is, Joe Rogan's, but it's those big ones that are pumping up the industry as a whole and leaving it open and kind of paving the way for a guy like me to come in and say, hey, this is what I'm passionate about. I'm just going to gather all of this and just put that out there into the world and broadcast that. And then you get to kind of see the returns from that. And early returns are, I get to meet a ton of artists. I've already met hundreds of artists that I never would have met if we didn't start this. And then realizing that that's what I liked about being a musician, was just being a part of a scene. I don't have to be the star. I just want to be there.
Oh, I agree. And being able to showcase the artists that really deserve it and have a story to tell. I think stories resonate with so many different people. Sometimes the story resonates more with me than the song does or the artist does. And it's just a special thing to share art. I mean, I'm a big fan of sharing art in general. So.
Well, and you're in such a great spot there. That Spencer, Iowa, Okoboji, that whole area, obviously it slows down in the winter, but during the summer, there are stages all over. You can't walk down the street or go around the lake without hearing live music. So you're in a great spot. You're doing a wonderful, wonderful thing. I love just... For me, not being on the show myself, which I'm sure we'll get down there eventually.
You got it.
Just seeing my friends on there gives me so much pride, right? Like, oh, I know them. I don't know if you've had a, Brad Morgan or Scott Kirkhart or any of these guys that, frequent that area quite a bit. But, for us artists and kind of changing hats right now, it makes the dream feel more real when you get those opportunities.
Yeah. I'm not an artist or a guitar player or anything myself, but I've had artists share very nice things about that, saying, being on air and being able to hear my song on air drives me even more to do better. And I think that's really sweet. But that's, really up to them. I think some folks are like, oh, whatever, radio. But I love radio. I love being able to share a message with the world. And again, it's all about drawing it back to those who deserve it. And Scott Kirkhart and Brad Morgan are both great guys, both of them from that Manson area. And that Manson town, they produce a lot of talent for the state of Iowa. It's really impressive because you got Jesse Wilson and Clint Riedel over there as well. Corey Waller and the Wicked Things are kind
favorites.
Yeah. So Manson it's incredible what just some of these different hotspots can do for the state of Iowa.
Must be something in the water over there, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
And it probably speaks to the fact that I know some of these guys that they came from families that made music in that area, right? So maybe it's something just about the environment that all of these people were raised in where music just filled your town. I grew up in Deadwood, South Dakota. It's very similar. I mean, per capita, it's only 1,000-person town, but per capita, right? Like a high percentage of those people are artists or musicians or something. And then you have little hotbeds like that around the country in small towns, not just a place like Nashville where you would expect it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm gonna, and I think part of it is because I'm from there, sure, but I will die on the hill and say that Fort Dodge, Manson, Iowa, they have the best music scene in the state. I mean, all the talent I just listed there, and even more. There's plenty of more that I have left off the list. Tank Anthony Band is from around there too. Owen O'Brien. There's so many more. I'd hate to leave someone off the list.
Right. Well, I would encourage anyone who's interested in that list to go to midwestcountrymusic.org, and you'll find most of them there. It's beautiful because the organization has given us a larger community to attach our smaller towns to. I grew up here in South Dakota. I don't live in Deadwood anymore, but I live in another small town in South Dakota. We don't have all of that all the time. We don't have access to, one, just more people to jam with or to gig with or whatever. And then the second part of that is like the resources and, I don't have a radio station in my town. There's not a lot of that out here in these small towns. And I think that's why someone like yourself and the fact that your station supports this too, it is so important to have that, because if we don't, I don't know where people get inspired from, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been a big fan of the Midwest Country Music Organization. I'm proud to go to the awards show every single year, which is up in Okoboji, Arnold's Park, and I like what you said earlier about part of being involved in local music is meeting other musicians and hearing what they have to say and what they play, and that's the fun of it. And I couldn't agree with you more.
And that love of it permeates the entire organization. We all feel the same way. And how great, once a year, April 12th, 2025, mark your calendars for this year's award show, that we get together. And, everybody was watching the CMAs recently, and I was like, I don't even care. I don't know anybody on that stage. I'm excited. The only award show I care about is ours, because I get to celebrate every single award, because somebody I know is going to win it. Right? Like that's way cooler to me than watching the CMAs and seeing Chris Stapleton win his 13th Male Vocalist of the Year award. Who cares? He's great.
Yeah.
He's great. That's nothing to take away from Chris Stapleton, but do we really need to honor the same man for a decade? How many careers could that have changed for someone else to win that award?
I agree. Awards go a long way because it gives a little bit more press, and you get to hold that next to your name. And those awards do mean a lot. I don't care, what anyone says. Winning any sort of award means a whole lot, because it gives you that much more exposure, and exposure is just the name of the game. It's
a legitimacy, right? It's not you telling someone that you're great. A whole group of other people said you're great, and now you get to tell the world. Well, you don't have to sit there and tell them anymore. When Jordan Beam goes, best country act in Iowa, you no longer have to be like, oh, well, I do this and that. No, your reputation now speaks for itself, right? And that's what the awards and those things are for. And how awesome that we have our own award show, because most people aren't going to do the research and be like, well, what's the Midwest Country Music Organization? And finding out that, oh, well, it's just a small group of, 300 or so members. Nobody's going to do that. They're going to be like, oh, you won an award. That's a big deal. Oh, you were on the radio. That's a big deal, right? So I think as artists, we need to take that different approach too, that like it all means something to someone else. Sure, it might not mean the world to you. It's just a little radio interview. It's just a podcast. It's just that. But it may be the point of entry for someone into your world. And if you think that's not important, then you're not in the right business.
Well, yeah, and that goes for everything. It's about who you know, I'd say. And yeah, but at the end of the day, like we were originally talking about, it's about getting together, sharing stories, inspiring to do better and be the best we can be moving forward.
And that's exactly what we're doing. Hank, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I look forward to meeting you before the award show, hopefully. And if not, I'll definitely see you there. The scene will be well represented this year. We're looking for some fun red carpet ideas to bust out. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate who you are and what you're doing. And you're a big part of where all of this goes. And we hope we get to work with you a lot more here at the scene.
Well, of course. And let's have you on the local spotlight sometime. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we can get Bubba Starts on the show.
Well, I would be tickled. Absolutely, Hank. You want to go ahead and plug the show and any of your online stuff and where people can find you?
You got it. Well, we are with Community First Broadcasting. You can find all information on that at exploreokoboji.com. You can also listen there, but if you're out of the Northwest region of Iowa, you can listen at 100.1 FM. That is Y100. And the local spotlight highlights hidden gems from all across the Midwest every single Friday morning at 8:30 a.m., a part of the Morning Fix.
Hank Ambrose, thanks for being part of the scene.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Remember to follow the Scene Projects on all your social media channels and get even more content at thesceneprojects.com.